Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Andrew Chappell, and today I'm going to speak about weight loss and transformations and physique athletes. So I'm a PhD in human nutrition and I specialize specifically in bodybuilders and bodybuilding populations, and I coach athletes via my company ProPrepCoaching with my partner Stephanie Noble. So on here you can see we've got a physique athlete who's presenting doing her presentation. She's actually one of my athletes. This is Kyra McLean. She's a figure athlete and she's taking part here at the PCA Championships, where she took a third place in her first ever competition. I'm sure you'll agree she looks fantastic. She's very lean, in great shape, and she would later go on to take a second place that year at British Finals and then go on to a World Championships and take a second place there as well. So a very successful season for her. And what I'm going to talk about is how these athletes get in shape and the different approaches which you can utilise to get in shape, and things that you just need to really consider when it comes to weight loss. Excuse me. So, things I'm going to talk about here really are the factors which influence weight loss, some pros and cons of different types of diets. I'm going to talk about strategies for weight loss, and then some case studies and some examples that I'm going to give you all today. So these are a few different pieces I'm going to talk about. Okay, so first and foremost, the big thing when it really comes down to factors that influence weight loss, the ultimate thing that really matters here is the calorie deficit. So we've got obviously the calories which we consume during the day as carbohydrates, protein, fat, and alcohol. And then we've got the calories which we expend out in a day through our body's resting energy requirements. So just the amount of energy your body needs to maintain itself. So hormonal function, cardiac function, breathing, maintaining muscle mass, hormones, things like that. Just being at rest. You've got the amount of energy required to ingest and digest food. That's called the thermic effect of feeding. You've also got non-exercise associated thermogenesis, and that's all the movements which we count as moving, walking about, any fidgeting I'm doing. So I'm moving my head back and forward. If I start playing and chewing with a pen or something, that all counts towards the neat amount, and it's important that we can potentially quantify that. And then on top of that, we've got what we describe as exercise associated thermogenesis. So that's where we actively make an effort to go out and expend energy rather than anything thereafter that. This diagram that I've got in front of us, this is broken down into different ways in which you can measure those different components. So there's methods called double label water, which is a molecular method which allows you to measure all the different aspects. You've got something called indirect calorimetry, which you can use to measure it via gaseous chambers, or you might use breath by breath analysis. And then you've got other methods which you can use, like questionnaires, pedometers, heart rate monitors, step counters, things like that, which will allow you to pick up all this additional activity. And sometimes from time to time, fitness professionals might ask you to wear those little bits and pieces. But ultimately what it comes down to is everything balanced on this side of the equation, which is all of this stuff here, versus everything balanced on this side of the equation, which is all your food. And ultimately, what happens is your energy requirements and your expenditure is influenced by your age. So if you're younger, you've typically got more muscle mass than someone who's, say, in their 80s and 90s. Your biological sex, so males typically have more muscle mass again than females. Again, you can see there's a theme here around muscle mass. The amount of mass you've got, again, muscle mass again is important. Bone mass, what your activity level is, and then obviously your master regulator of energy production, which is thyroid hormones. So if you've got a fully functioning, normal working thyroid, then you'll release plenty of cortisol, which will tell your body to break down energy and to utilize it. If you don't, then your body will not be telling you to process energy. Now, if you read the textbooks, what they'll usually say is if you want to create some weight loss, then they suggest a 500 calorie deficit, and that equates to around about a 0.5 kilogram of weight loss per week. So that's what the textbook says here. And ultimately, so long as you maintain a calorie deficit, you'll lose weight. That's what really, really matters. But maintaining that calorie deficit is more challenging than you might think. Now, there's lots of different ways in which you can diet. You can see I've listed all the different ones here. So you've got low carb, keto, low fat, intermittent fasting. You've got Weight Watchers, you've got paleo. In terms of bodybuilding and transformations, I always favour the lower fat option. It's important that we keep our protein content very, very high. But really, you can see that all that ultimately matters is creating calorie deficit at the end of the day. And a question I typically get put to me is, Andrew, I'm thinking about doing this diet or that diet. Should I do it? And I'm very often in a position where I've got to say to them, well, if you've got a problem adhering to a particular style of diet, it might be useful for you, but there's no more magic associated with one diet versus another diet. One thing which is likely to be a difference is as soon as you start excluding entire food groups, so you take all the carbohydrates or you take all the fibre out of diet, or if you consume a lot of processed foods immediately, then what you're going to eventually see is you might see some detrimental effects to other health markers beyond just weight loss. So ketogenic, not particularly good for colorectal health. Intermittent fasting might be useful for maintaining blood glucose levels, but not necessarily useful for building muscle mass. Keto and low carb, again, not necessarily useful for maintaining exercise performance, but might be useful for helping you lose weight. So it ultimately just comes down to the calorie deficit at the end of the day. The thing about weight loss, though, is that it's a bit of a moving target. So whenever you create a calorie deficit, you always get a bit of compensation takes place. So you get around about a 10 to 20% reduction in your body's energy output as soon as you make a calorie deficit in place. So what used to be 500 calories can end up being 400 to 450 calories, which obviously influences that 0.5 kilograms of weight loss you're going to get per week. If you've got a really poor diet and you start to eat through muscle tissue and you start to lose muscle mass, then you can bet that calorie deficit again will start to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and you can end up in situations whereby as you diet, you're dieting off as much muscle mass as you are losing fat mass, and then obviously that's not particularly useful for weight loss. Other things as well as a typical problem I come up against is when I give people diets, is that they either don't stick to a plan or they vary their diet very significantly. And by doing that, what happens is you can see large swings in the energy intake day to day. And because of that, what can happen is you can end up being not in deficit some days and in calorie deficit other days. And that's not particularly useful for weight loss as well. What you really need is consistent intake, consistent activity levels and consistent sleeping patterns to allow your body to facilitate the continuous cycle of what we call lipolysis, so the breakdown of fatty acids for the release of energy. That's ultimately what we're trying to do, and these other diets that I mentioned on our page, they can allow you to get that good adherence and be able to really implement that. Adaptive thermogenesis. So as I mentioned before, sometimes what happens is we end up being in a situation of whereby our body makes that 10 to 20% adaptation, so we don't get the same amount of calorie drop as we might like. And one thing that people have talked about is reduction in things like fidgeting, not moving as much. If you ever talk to competitors, then they'll say things like, oh, I'm a lot more tired, I don't want to get up quite as much, I'd rather sit more on the couch. And you're always sort of fighting against that. People have talked about different strategies which they've utilised, so things like wearing weighted vests to overcome these sort of weights, but then obviously that comes with its own problems too. What's be going around wearing a 10 or 15 kilogram weighted vest for 20 weeks for 8 hours a day just to overcome a 100 calorie drop. Is it worth it? Really, it's up to you. This can be whereby things like cheat meals can be popular. So if you've got a reduction in your overall BMR or that amount of energy that you're expending per day, then having things like refeeds and cheat meals can boost that back up and allow your body to overcome these reductions. There's a lot of interest around these things. There's obviously a psychological benefit associated with these things as well. In terms of dietary strategies, if there are a few things that we've got to consider whenever we go into a calorie deficit, our body is going to start to utilize the process of gluconeogenesis, and that is the process of creating glucose or glycogen from non-glucose stores. So we break down fatty acids. We use the fatty acids for energy. Fatty acids are joined in chains that we call triglycerides. The glycerol can then get utilized to make glucose. The other concern though for us really is that we can break down protein through a process called proteolysis, and when we break down proteins, what can happen is we end up losing muscle mass for the sake of creating glucose. So it's important that our bodies it's important that our diets are not too severe, and when we start to go to large calorie deficits or really low carbohydrate diets, we can really be in danger of breaking down our body's protein stores for the sake of making glycogen, which ultimately influences the amount of muscle mass that we've got on our diet at the end of the day. Over here you can see we've got the metabolic pathways. I don't really need to go into, but you can see how it's all interconnected from here. Incidentally, there's some nice case studies of natural bodybuilders getting ready for contests, and whereby diets have been severe, low carb, and very, very quick to help lose weight loss. We've seen up to 43% of the muscle, or rather weight, which is lost just coming purely from muscle mass, and that's also a catastrophic diet from there. So ultimately what we want to do is we want to get the calories just right. So you want to get yourself somewhere around about here. So you've got a calorie deficit around about here, so you'll allow yourself to lose weight, but not too low so that you're absolutely starving and that you start to lose muscle mass at the end of the day. So that's really what we're trying to aim for as well. Different ways in which you can do that. So across the top here, I've got a nice example. So you can see the blue line here is your body's energy requirements, your basal metabolic rate. We've got days of a month here. And you can see that over time, the BMR does reduce. So the calorie intake needs to be adjusted as we go along at the same time to bear that in mind. Different strategies. So you've got what I'd call a stable intake here. So this is eating calories for the days when you exercise, reducing the calories when you don't exercise, and then eating them again when you exercise. So this is a weekend. You can see this is one day during the week. And we've got this up and down pattern, and you can see the average energy intake. Other patterns you can see are things like carbohydrate cycling. So you go high day intake, medium day intake, really low intake, straight back up to high day intake, and you've got this cycling effect. And the cheat day approach is very similar to that, and you've got this cycling effect as well. But you can have a larger bolus dose of carbohydrates on your cheat day, so long as you then draw it back on there. And the idea with these sort of cycling approaches is that you might be able to maintain your BMI, or rather BMR, at a much higher level from there. Of course, the problem is with the cycling approaches is it doesn't say anything about how it's going to influence your training, because we need the carbohydrates to maintain intense exercise. So here's typically what happens to stored glycogen levels when we start a training day and at the end of the training day, and you can see that we've got muscle glycogen stores, and after every session and every day they just get that little bit lower. Here's another example of this, a difference between a high carbohydrate diet and a low carbohydrate diet. This is a time course. You can see you've got, these are carbohydrate meals. And again, pause this if you want to look at this in more detail. But you can see over time what happens is that the muscles get more and more depleted of carbohydrate. And the problem with this, of course, is that whenever we want to do any weight training, we know that high intensity exercise, so the sort of stuff you do when you're doing bodybuilding training, where you build a lot of lactate up in the muscles, really is largely dependent on carbohydrate, whereas the low intensity stuff, which is really the sort of 20 to 30 rep stuff, the cardio exercise, really utilizes a lot more fat. So if you want to train well, then it's very important that we've got enough muscle glycogen stores. And this is an old graphic, but it's one that we're well aware of, and exercise scientists have been aware of for a long time, that people typically perform better when they've got enough carbohydrates compared to sort of high fat diets and low carb diets at the end of the day. So we've got to have a balance in the diet, and certainly the ProPrep method is always to try and go a lower fat, maintain the carbohydrates as high as we possibly can throughout the diet, for the sake of trying to promote as much muscle mass on the frame, much exercise intensity on the frame as we possibly can. Okay, time ultimately is the most important commodity. So we want to keep the muscle on our frame. The more time you've got, the better, because quicker weight loss diets typically lose weight from muscle mass more than slower weight loss diets. If we can have ourselves 2 weeks to spare for a diet, that always helps. So we've got a little bit of extra time. And then the length of the diet really does depend on a few factors. What's their starting point? Are you in shape or are you not in shape? If you're not in shape, then you've got to diet longer than someone who's in shape, and you'll see what I mean from the case studies. Males versus females, and experienced competitors versus non-experienced competitors. There's also genetics too. Some people you'll give a diet to, they'll just lose weight, and that's not fair, but that's just what it is. Other people will have to fight for absolutely everything. Females typically are slower at losing weight than the males in my experience, and then more experienced competitors kind of know what they're going up against, and know how long a diet is going to be compared to the novices. Everything is more stressful for a novice because it's all brand new at the end of the day, and it's your job to guide them through the process. Higher intakes, it's important that we get the intake as high as we possibly can, so that, and sometimes we might need to do something that's called a pre-diet as well. So you can work out some sums, and this is a useful exercise for anyone who's thinking about losing weight. But if you've got someone who's, say, Joe Blogs, 100 kilos, it's 20% body fat, he's got 3,000 calories is what he's starting his diet at, and you know he's 20% body fat. If he's wanting to do a bodybuilding contest, you're probably talking getting him down to 5% body fat, so he's got 15 kilograms to lose. That's 33 pounds. At 15 weeks, that would be around about 2 pounds per week with a 500 calorie deficit. You want to factor in maybe a little bit of extra time just to be on the safe side. So you're probably looking at something in the region of around about 37 to 40 weeks, just to be on the safe side from there. So you can do some BMR calculations, work out how much this person's actually consuming, and then you can work out if this person's got enough time to get in shape. Now, if you work out this person was, instead of eating 3,000 calories, was only eating 2,600 odd calories, and then you've got to make a calorie deficit to it, then that means you're going to put this person who's 100 kilos and a 2,200 calorie diet for 15 weeks, and sometimes they'll just not make it because that's severe for someone that size. So things to consider from here. Here's an example of this. So you've got someone who did the pre-diet, kept themselves in good shape, built up their calories, they then start their diet, and you can see they've got a stepwise reduction going on here, and they're successful at the contest because they're able to maintain their muscle mass. Someone else didn't quite get their calories as high, but he still did all right. And then you've got the 2,200 calorie example, who ends up down at 1,500 calories. I mean, they're not going to do as well. So what you're looking to do is you're trying to increase your calorie intake in the off season without getting fat, and we're not talking about bulking, we're just talking about increasing the baseline amount and really monitoring things like your waist circumference and your body fat levels to ensure that you're eating enough so you can diet on as much as possible. Protein's important, so we need to make sure we've got enough protein in the diet and enough carbohydrate. Protein is also insufficient. It's not a really good energy source because you lose a lot of it when it comes to thermogenesis. So about 25% of what you eat is going to be lost, but it does help you spare muscle tissue. There's only 9 essential amino acids, so you could argue that it's more important that we just have the branched chains, and lots of people will eat branched chains for the sake of that. However, too little protein will lead to muscle loss, and you're probably looking at around about 2.33 grams per kilogram of body weight is how much protein you should be consuming. Meal timing gets more and more important as you get leaner and leaner and leaner. So taking protein around training sessions is a good idea. Okay, now many of the strategies we utilize at ProPrep are based on my research. So this is a famous one that we did some time ago, 2018. But what we sort of identified was that the most successful bodybuilders followed diets, and these are ones that placed in the competition versus not placing. They had diets which had higher energy intakes on average, and these are stages of the diet: the start, the middle, and the end. Than the ones that didn't place well. Carbohydrate was largely where that extra energy came from, but they also ate more protein as well. The fat intake was lower, so it's important that we get our guys to follow high protein, sort of high carbohydrate diets where possible. And this is grams per kilogram of body weight. If you can get about 5 grams per kilogram of body weight, you're really onto a winner there as well. And these findings are significant as well. Now, a few other things that we need to consider. When it comes to weight loss and when it comes to dietary strategies, what you're really looking at is an outcome. And if you follow the approaches and the strategies that we're saying to follow, then they work. There's absolutely no doubt that they work. And this is a good quote by Jordan Peters, and I think it's a great one, but he's right. People will literally eat nails and cardboard if they think it's going to help them win a competition. And that's really what you're up against when you're competing against people. So you can't afford to be lax. You can't afford to take shortcuts or to skip meals or to cheat on your diet, because you've got people that you're going up against that are doing those sort of things. And saying that though, you don't have to eat nails and cardboard. You can make good dietary choices. So it's important that we eat foods which are nutrient dense and energy poor. So vegetables, cereals, these things are also satiating because they've got fibre in them, and they keep you feeling less hungry rather than refined foods like your cream of rices that you might want to eat compared to something like porridge oats at the end of the day, because they've got a lot of volume in them, minimum processing, and they keep your gastrointestinal tract nice and healthy as well. So clean eating can be boring. It can also feel overly restrictive at the end of the day, and that's why people put cheat meals in there as well, but it is incredibly effective for helping you get in shape. And this is a nice example of it. So one Mars bar gives you 250 calories, but you can see here if you ate the same amount of calories from cucumbers, then you'd have to eat an awful lot of cucumbers, and no one's eating that. And you can imagine you'd be much fuller eating this food and satiated rather than eating this. This wouldn't be much fun, mind you. It's a bit of an extreme example, but you get the point. Other things which people can do to get yourself in shape for a contest is if it fits your macros. I should specify that this works very well for getting yourself in shape. Not necessarily the best, I don't think, for getting yourself super shredded, mind you, but I have had guys do this, and it does work. I'm just more preferential for having the guys follow diets which maintain a stable intake through it, and they're always eating similar things. It is potentially less restrictive because you've got more choice. It can be more social. It's not an excuse to binge. You do have to calorie count, which can be a nuisance from somewhere. But there are other issues as well that you've got to maintain. So restaurant foods, for example, this study here by Jumperts et al. Specifies that restaurant food menus, which say they've got calories in them, can be off by more than 200%. Snack foods, 25%. Frozen foods, 8%. So it becomes very difficult to know sometimes exactly what you're eating. So whole foods are always preferred, in my opinion, even if you're going to follow this sort of approach. And here's an example of a if it fits your macros approach versus a stable intake. So if you're eating the same foods all the time, you know exactly what's going in, and you've got a very consistent intake. If you're following if it fits your macros, where you're creating deficits and so on, they could be higher and lower than actually you've calculated and anticipated for. And sometimes you can see that it's going over and above the BMR as well. So that's an underestimation and an overestimation example of the calories. But it can absolutely still be done, these sort of approaches at the end of the day. One thing to say is that natural versus non-natural competitors are completely different. Drug intake can definitely compensate for poor dietary choices. I've seen it many, many times where people can follow really crash diets and they just use a combination of testosterone, growth hormone, thyroid hormone, clenbuterol, and that just allows them to get away with really suspect dietary approaches that natural competitors could never hope to utilise. So just bear that in mind when you're looking at the health and fitness advice which is out there, who's delivering it, and what else might they be prepared to do, because these guys and girls, they don't have to worry about muscle mass loss. Oh yeah, and then this is another thing, even within our natural communities and all, people often lie and exaggerate about what they're doing around cardio, eating plans and so on, and they often do it to boast or to potentially throw you off as well. Okay, so this is the weight loss and some things we need to consider. Here's just here's some case studies of some athletes of mine. So I've got Zoe Cook, aka Body Positive on Instagram, Lara Field, aka Laddie Da. We've got Chelsea Doherty, and then we've got Tallulah, aka Michelle Smith. So some examples. So this is Lara Field. You can see here she looks awesome. This is her at the start of her diet. This is her at the end of the diet, and obviously this is her on stage. She was second at the PCA British. She was second at the UKDFBA British, and she won the BNBF British title in 2020. She started her diet at 73.9 kilos and got down to 55.5 kilos. So a huge amount of weight loss, almost 20 kilograms, not quite, but you can see we tried to keep her at around about 0.5% of weight loss per week and around about 0.35% per week in terms of the kilograms of loss. This is the graphic, and you can see there were periods where she had rapid weight loss, and then she had stagnation, then rapid weight loss again, consistent, and it goes up and down. And this is the general pattern that you see throughout, and where these spikes are at the end are where she did contests, because there's 3 different competitions from here. The big thing from Lara here though was that she was too heavy to start with, and that really she should be starting her next prep at around about 64 kilos rather than the 74 kilos, because if she does that, she'll only be 13% above her previous stage weight, and then that allows her to have a 20-week shorter diet. So things to look at here is you've got decent weight loss initially. It kind of levels off a little bit, but there are peaks and troughs along the way as well. So this was following one of the ProPrep dietary approaches, which was high in carbohydrates, high in protein, and low in fat. Chelsea Doherty, again, looks fantastic. She won the PCA First Timers. This is a great picture of her and with Kyra on stage, actually. Both of them did the same competition, and you can see it's a really good transformation from when she started to where she eventually got to. You can see started at 66.4 kilograms, managed to lose 13.1 kilos, 25% of her weight, and it was around about 0.3 kilograms loss per week to about 0.55% weight loss per week, 46 weeks. Big thing for Kyra really again is if she can keep herself around about 60 kilos, a nice round number, then it means she doesn't have to diet quite as hard next time. So she can have a potentially 16-week shorter diet from there. And again, you can see you've got steady weight loss, but there are periods whereby it was steady and it went up. This is a number of weeks here you can see before it goes down again from here, and she did great. I was very proud of her. We've got Zoe Cook here. This is a nice acrobatic pose she's doing on stage here. This is her at the 2 Bros, and these are some pictures of her taking progress shots for her. Much more steady weight loss for Zoe. The good thing about Zoe was that she didn't have to lose quite as much weight as the other girls. She still lost over a stone at 10.6 kilograms, and she was about 0.69% weight loss per week. Next time I think we'd keep her about 64 kilograms and push her to get leaner next time, because she's looking to try and win our pro card. And I definitely think she could be in contention for something like that. Okay, final example here I've got is Michelle Stewart, and she did the BNBF Scottish, which she won. She came second at the Granite City, and then she competed at the WNBF UK as a Masters competitor. You can see from where she started to where she got to, Again, amazing results on here. She was dieting for 57 weeks, so a very long diet, actually, from 82 kilograms down to 65 kilos, 17 kilos lost, around about 0.3 kilograms per week, and around about percentage of 0.36 loss per week as well. Again, if she keeps herself around 75 kilos, then we can be looking at around about a 23 week shorter diet as well. And you can see with Michelle's weight loss, it went up and down and up and down, and there's periods where it goes up until it eventually got in a nice groove over here at the same time. Now, I've shown all female examples, and I've done this on purpose because I think it's worth mentioning that weight loss in females is typically much slower than males. I can give a guy a diet, he will lose 0.5 kilograms per week. He'll not have to worry about losing muscle mass really at the same rate. His weight is not going to fluctuate to the same degree. Doesn't have to worry about hormonal fluctuations, the menstrual cycle affecting him as well. And you just don't have to diet for as long and as hard as well. So I'm going to show you some examples of this. So that was Chelsea, Lara, Zoe and Michelle. But if I actually show you, rather than just the graphics, what the actual weight loss looked like on a day-to-day basis, you can see there's huge fluctuations. And where we've got red is where we've got the highest weight for someone. This is Michelle Smith, Masters competitor, and where we've got yellow is the lowest weight. And there's some really crazy swings across a week. So you can see 78.6 kilograms on one day. The rest of the week that she weighed herself, she was 77 kilograms. So almost a kilo difference. You've got other examples here. So you've got a kilo swing across the course of 2 days. So quite dramatic. And here in this particular week, she weighed herself on Monday after being as low as 77.5 kilos. And then the next day she's weighed herself, she was 79.8 kilograms. So again, major swing here in the amount of weight that she's put on over the course of the days, and then she's back down to 76.3. If she was someone who had not been tracking her weight and had just been weighing herself every Monday, at this point she would have been really disheartened, but then she's weighed herself the next day, and that's something that she's conceded to me as something that she's really struggled with her whole life, is following diets and then seeing that her weight goes up and then it goes down, and finding that she's just going to smash a whole load of biscuits because she's not getting the results she wants when she could have weighed herself over the course of the week. So you can see huge fluctuations in weight like this, and it's largely water. Same thing here. This is Chelsea, and an example that I'm going to show you with her. Chelsea's a shift worker. Same idea. You can see large variations in the amount of weight that she might be gaining from day to day. So there's a 0.5 kilogram difference over the course of a few days, just like that. There's a kilo swing just from here, and this is really all coming down to just sleeping patterns from there. Other useful things though that you can do is you can take measurements to track to see how you're getting on as well at the same time. Okay, so I'm just about to wrap this up now. Hopefully you found this useful, but lessons over the course of it is that when it comes to weight loss, the big thing we need to focus on is a calorie deficit. There's lots of different ways that we can create a calorie deficit, but preserving muscle mass is ultimately, as sports nutritionists, our main priority. And if we want to get in shape for contests, the main thing that we want to really focus on. Weight loss is slow and it can be really unpredictable, particularly in females, so it's important that we get plenty of time to get in shape for these particular competitions. Thanks very much for your attention. That's my presentation. If you want to find out more information, please do check out the various Instagram pages, the websites as well, and also check out the WNBFUK.com, and hopefully this gives you a bit more of an idea about things to look out for when it comes to weight loss. I guarantee you that if you're in a calorie deficit, you stick to the plan and you just give it time and be patient, it will work over the course of time. There are lots of different things you can utilize, like diet breaks, refeeds, calorie cycling, but as long as you stay the course, it will work. It really is just a matter of time. Okay, thank you for your time. Ciao, ciao.